So I think we're going to get started. Now you guys know that my last name is Italian with the gentile, so I hope you enjoyed your cannoli. We have those on the weekends. So welcome to the after lunch session. We're going to start by inviting Gary up to talk a little bit about the Indigenous oral history walk that happened this morning. I was really disappointed. I personally couldn't go. I had kid drop off, and they're slow. But really looking forward to hearing. I know. But really looking forward to hearing how it went, because it was a space limited. So I know a lot of you are probably excited to hear the same thing. So Gary, take it away.
Oh, okay. Space is limited. Okay. Well, I do thank everybody who got to go on the walk this morning, and I think all the people who crashed. That was against the rules, but that's okay. And if you'd like to see more like this, we can actually do it next year, and maybe we'll have a more nature-friendly venue. But we can work through this. But we did write down some of the common things we talked about, and then I'm going to open it up. Because Mark says there's no reason, like I ask all the questions and there's no space for everybody to ask me questions, so we're going to totally do this later. But I want to start about acknowledging when you EA practitioners, try not to say you people, come to our communities to meet with us about your projects. Why is it that you always have three options that we have to choose from as First Nations people? But we don't even have the option of saying no, right? That's always entertaining for us. We have to choose one of three options of the least impact to the environment or to our rights, but you never allow us to say, maybe we don't want that, right, under the treaty. That's never an option. That's never a conversation, right? So we need to start addressing that. I'd like to acknowledge Peter, and for the NMECP to actually thank you for acknowledging the duty to consult and accommodate. That's the first time I've ever heard the NMECP say that. It's always entertaining when I read your reports as consultants. It's the duty to consult. It's legally the duty to consult and accommodate, moving towards consent. So I actually thank you, Peter, for saying that, because that was actually really great, because we need to actually get saying the right legal framework that we're working in. People like to shorten things. The table of contents likes to be shortened. It's just duty to consult. And so we need to actually make sure we're saying the right things. I think too, one of the things we talked about in the river, which was actually great, was that when we still come to Indigenous communities, it's still an extractive process, and how you still have something that you need or want, and you're going there to take it. It's more of a transactional relationship. You feel that if you give money for capacity building, that is how you solve the problem. We're still not really understanding the boundaries of a healthy relationship and meaningful engagement and a relationship to begin with, so we need to understand what the boundaries are. Because typically what happens is you come, you do your project, and I never see you again until the next project, right? We need to have that ongoing meaning and relationship. To answer poor Beth's question that no one knew about with the treaty maps, right? And I remember I took cartography at Fleming College, and they're like, yeah, GIS is coming, and my professor was like, this will never catch on, right, this GIS thing. So I thought that was funny. So we talked about the ATRIS system, right? Does anybody know what the big problem with the ATRIS system is by the federal government? Besides the First Nation team in the room. We know what's wrong with it. It is actually wrong. It was created by a man named J.L. Morris in 1943, and that gentleman did not like curved lines. He straightened them all. So every map on ATRIS that Matrix produces is incorrect. And it's only as valid as 1943. So what happens when I have a 2011 and a 2018 treaty? That was Beth's question, but that was missed. That's okay. And it's okay. Your question was good. And people don't know the answer. Right? Well, that's right. You're learning the right questions. But that's the interesting thing. I have a 2018 settlement map from the Supreme Court of Canada and the federal government. I was told I can't legally share it with you. It's your responsibility to learn. How is that fair? How are you supposed to come to me understanding my rights when the government that you represent did not give you the right map or tool to be effective? That's a problem. That's a problem that you all need to change, not the First Nations. We know our territories, we know our mapping. That's a big one. I like to thank Beth for reminding us of that, right? That's a really big one. Because I have maps that are amazing. I actually made the point on the river when we were there. It was funny. My grandfather often talked about it. It was illegal for the Williams Treaty First Nations to touch a map until 1993, right? Illegal for us to hire a lawyer. Now I just recently bought all the maps to our territory from the treaty on Amazon and Etsy. To think about the dynamic, the power shift that's happened since then. Other things that our little First Nation corner there have heard in through the course of the conference is that we're still getting the order of importance wrong. We are rights-bearing people. I consistently see people saying public stakeholder engagement, ta-da, and Indigenous engagement. Legally, we need to consent to what the public or settlers are saying. That's what the law says. So we need to start wording that correctly. That's actually constitutionally unsound. So that's definitely always a faux pas, and I'm sorry if your presentation had that in it, but you're just totally incorrect. So knowledge systems, we're still putting this Western science, we talked about this on the river, Western science ahead of our knowledge system. If your knowledge was so good, your infrastructure would last more than 50 years. You're still digging up my infrastructure from 3,000 years ago. Look at it that way. Western knowledge is an invasive entity on this landscape, no different than Phragmites, giant hogweed, or purple loosestrife. That's the reality of it. The big one that always drives me nuts is that we need to stop saying that First Nations don't have capacity. We do have capacity. The really fundamental reality is you as EA practitioners don't have the capacity, knowledge, or understanding of what inherent rights are, what our treaty rights are. Our team has gone so far as actually creating environmental constraints analysis around our treaty rights. What was written in our treaties to actually use Western knowledge to make mapping for that you can understand. So before I end and open up the floor to questions, I'm going to ask you, what are the Mississauga inherent rights? Now you guys can answer. I'm going to go with the microphone. Yeah, what are the Mississauga inherent rights? Don't be shy. I will call on people I know in the audience. I am that kind of professor, just so you know. Like the one, yes.
Okay, so the treaty that shows that there's only these 6 inches that are taken up, but the rest is.
Right, so we have treaty rights. So we talked about in Southern Ontario, in my territory, we signed 19 of the 42 treaties. Settlers can only occupy 6 inches of soil. So all your municipal infrastructure for all your EAs violates the Constitution of Canada. That's a big one, right? Basically, all of a sudden we now have a whole other world of problems. Certain tree species that bear nuts or fruit or maple syrup are protected by the treaties. All wetlands are protected by treaties. Let's go ahead.
From the riverbank?
Yep, 66 feet from the water's edge, right? That retaining wall that the TRCA and maybe Waterfront Toronto is a violation of the treaty. They're not allowed to be there, right? Because that's a migration corridor for First Nations people. All wetlands are deemed provincially significant under the treaty. That's why the old PPS had a 120-meter buffer. That's to accommodate the Mississauga treaties, right? Really interesting stuff. But what is an inherent right? Does anybody know any of our inherent rights? Go ahead, Jillian. No. That's a misconception by settlers. That's an assumed, like you think we're all about hunting and fishing. When I go home, I'm going to go hunting and fishing, right? We talked about similar to the, can we just buy you new land to go do your spirituality over there, right? That's kind of, we're getting along there. That's right. I love working in the north because you guys actually know what your inherent rights are. That's the interesting part of all this. As in the Williams Treaty settlement area, we actually don't know what our inherent rights are because government, all the natural resources management government, MECP, Ontario Parks, Parks Canada, all the different levels of government legally denied our rights for 100 years. So we lost all our inherent rights. We're relearning them. So when you are saying that you're protecting my inherent rights, I always ask, what are they? I don't know what they are. That's a really interesting statement for me to make, isn't it? And the final thing I said about frustrations for First Nations people is when you deem a project that is not of significance to our treaty or inherent rights, who made that decision? Was it the community? It's usually a non-native person sitting in an MECP office, right? How do they have that knowledge that we don't? Well, what is an impact, right? DFO does it all the time to us. We deem there's no impact to your rights, but you never asked us, had the courtesy to ask us the question. So with that, I'm going to open it to Mark to fire a question at me. Oh, that's horrible, eh? Worst friend ever. Don't be so serious. You guys are staring at me like, oh my God. Come on, Mark, you got it. We only have like 10 minutes, Mark, come on. Look at Violetta, she's like, I'm so afraid of not going over time.
Perfect. All right, I'm gonna allow a hard one at you. And if you don't know the answer, it's fair. So recently, as of last year, we saw a court case come out of Montreal, or sorry, not Montreal, out of Quebec, the Montour case that redefines potentially what are Aboriginal rights. And it places more of the definition in the hands of the community to define what those rights are. Are you familiar with Montour? Yeah. Maybe share some thoughts on where you see that going.
Yeah, allowing the community to define their rights. This is where I always say it gets messy with Canadians because like we all talk, a lot of us talked about timelines and how we elevate the timeline, right? It's painful. Because I'm like, that's never going to work. But that's just me. But allow us the time to do that, right? Allow us the time to actually figure out what our rights are. What are, like, they always think our rights are 10,000 years ago. We're still trying to figure out our rights today, right? A great example is, we'll use a massive highway that's maybe built in my territory, maybe not. And my kid's caught and a species at risk. And I emailed a friend of mine at MECP and I said, hey dude, like, does this actually live here? Or is this something new? Is this, you know, we're also, we can't give you that answer because an Indigenous person caught that fish. I'm like, no, your goddaughter caught that fish. I'm asking the question is this supposed to be here? We've never seen it before because of climate change. Right? That was my question. Not, is this an Indigenous thing? Is this not an Indigenous thing? My question was, does it live here? Right? And then also, then it turns around, we ask the question, do we have rights to this species? Right? That's the really interesting thing. Have we harvested this before? We don't know. Let's ask the question. Let's get us all together. Right? I found a map, and it's the 1994 Mississauga harvest map. I found that in the floor of the band office one day when I was there. Very useful for us to determine where people hunt and our rights are. But if we don't look, we have to look and discover as well. And that's why I love that court case, because it's like, let us define our rights. Stop telling us what our rights are. Right? We still have that parentalism. What's that? Self-determination, right? Good question, Mark. No problem. That's why he's on the Indigenous knowledge team with me. That's right. He's my token white guy. Don't be shy now. We got like, how much time we got left? Haley, can we help? I know it always gets awkward when I want people to come up here and talk in front of everybody.
I don't have a
so
question.
intense.
I have many questions, but I'm not going to ask a
But you
question. I'm
see me
just
all the
going to
time.
clarify something. We at OAIA have, for many years been talking about Indigenous engagement, Indigenous knowledge, and we're the token not Indigenous people having these conversations. And we were very, very honored last year when we were able to actually solicit 2 members of the Indigenous community to join the board. Gary is one, Lindsay is our second, and it's just been really a blessing and to be able to work with you and to ask all of these questions that you're uncomfortable asking. And I always preface with, you know, I hope I'm not insulting you, or I hope I'm saying this right. I'm not usually saying it right. And then it's, you know, we get great answers and great conversation. I want to thank you. We used Gary and Lindsay to form our Indigenous Knowledge Committee, and Mark, the token white guy, is the other member of the committee. And it's really fulsome, and it's really helpful. And I'll invite all of you who are members of OAIA to stay tuned. We'll have some announcements coming. We are starting a video series, fireside chats and other activities where we as the board, we're going out and we're having these conversations and we're having these learning sessions, and they'll advance as we advance our learning and our relationships and our partnerships. So just wanted to let everybody know that that's happening and sort of explain the behind the scenes chat that just happened between Mark and
I think that was peer pressure, just so you know, when you recruited me.
It was a little peer pressure.
I'm like, oh, I guess I don't have an option.
He unfortunately sat beside me at the conference last year,
like,
and by the end he was
I guess I don't. Sylvia's my ride, so I don't think I'm going to go home if I don't say yes to this. And everybody needs a Mark, just so everybody knows.
So I just had a question, sort of as a, like, almost like asking for an opinion. When we did our presentation yesterday, and I used the term "at the community's request," did you happen to catch that and where it came in?
I actually really loved many aspects of your presentation, and so I love that at the community's request. Like, there's not every project we need to have engagement on. Everybody's talking about roads, right? Oh God, Lorenzo's coming up now. I don't know what I say now. It's funny because we actually said we don't need to know about every road the municipalities are doing. Here's some rules, though, for you to follow about the roads. The best part about your presentation resonated with me was the use of art, and then I talked about this on the river because I love that. I went to school originally to be an artist. My father said you need to get a real job, so I said, okay, I'm going to become a biologist. He said, what the hell is that? And I'm like, I don't know. I just work for the government and eat ice cream all day, and that's what I did for the first 5 years. But it's understanding that artwork and understanding the ways our culture actually draw impact. I'm a photographer. I actually film the salmon all the time, and it actually, you know, that way I could pass that on to people and say, if this has changed, you have a video record, right? There's a lot of way at the community request. I love that because not every project is significant, right?
So what I wanted to get at was when you just said we get money for projects and we sort of push it at the communities, and then I'm saying at the community's request, but does it make sense that when we say at the community's request, it's almost like because the communities are asking for a response to a hard situation? Like, we also mentioned that development is coming. They can't avoid it forever, and the communities are feeling pressured. And so they're coming to us and saying, we need something. And then there's the issue of capacity. And we're like, okay, well, we're gonna choose this to introduce to you. And they have asked us for assistance, and we've decided technically what they're gonna get. And then we you know, got our steering committee together. But is that, like, in your opinion, do you see that as more as a response to pressure? Like, that they're being pressured and we're just like coming up with a solution for them and tossing it at them?
Yeah, I would agree with that because we're typically like, when you start throwing money around like that, it's a new thing for First Nations people. Like, ironically, we're, you know, a third world countries within one of the wealthier countries, so it's hard to fathom that money coming in and it alters and changes people. But we need to be able to respond, but then in a good way through our knowledge system and our time. But we also need time to do the studies. Like, if we did meaningful Indigenous knowledge studies from the past, if we started doing them every year, we'd actually have an output for the future. Right, that way if the transmission line's coming through your community or this new hydro project or maybe a small modular reactor, you're able to respond quicker, and it takes that capacity pressure away because it's like, here's all the rules of working in our territory. I also find that, we talked about yesterday about understanding how to work with Indigenous people. Well, we actually have the rules to most of our communities online, right? Right up to how do you do a land acknowledgement in our community. So if you don't Google us, I find that, I said this to my non-Indigenous staff the other day. I said, the fact that you don't know about the community that we're about to work for shows privilege, that you assume that we're all the same. You need to do better as my staff to represent me and my company. I think they're kind of offended by that, but I'm like, this is the honest truth. You need to be able to search things up and find things. If not, ask those questions, right?
The first time I went into a community as a researcher, I introduced the idea that these studies they already exist.
Yeah.
If you have a school on your reserve, or you have a fire hall, or somebody did a study, that study exists somewhere. So you need to open your minds to the fact that it exists and you can have it. You should have it. And David, wherever he is, he really we had a conversation this morning about the presentation that we did, and he really got the idea that it's grassroots. You should be approaching Indigenous engagement from the bottom up. You should never be approaching it from the top down. There should never be an invite in the mail for them to come to you. You should be always looking to find them where they're at. Considering them the experts in what you're after, and making sure that, you don't just go for the buy-in, you're looking for the knowledge, and you're looking for the relationship building. So that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah, I love the comment this morning too about, we elect as the citizens, the chief and council, right? I always find it funny too when Canadians, that's all I'll just label everybody as, sends a letter to a chief and council and expects a response, right? And I'm always like, no, you send it to the consultation team, you send it to these people, I'll pick up my buddy Mark because I can do that. I'm like, Mark, you're just Mark, right? I'm the chief of a community potentially. So why should I give you the time of day as just a Canadian doing a project? Are you Trudeau? No? Okay. Are you Ford? No? Okay, then you don't matter. That's the reality, right? Our leaderships have busy schedules and they change. Work with the consultation teams. Lorenzo? This should be good. Just stand up a little bit, buddy.
Yeah. I'd like to ask a question to everyone in this room.
Oh, thank God.
How can you affect what we're talking about here today for the future? And I think I'm going to answer my own question. I think that recruitment right from universities to get those qualified people through the English manner of being qualified to participate in your companies and organizations, to actually go and seek someone like me from a university to help you with developing teaching tools. We can adapt our educations to anything that comes along because we've been adapting ourselves all our lives. So I guess I'll just end by saying, go out and seek some First Nations people to be your boss. Because it's the bosses who make the decisions and they're not here. So you yourselves can affect change that way. Miigwech.
Thanks, Lorenzo.
Bonjour, ani kiwet noden dishnakaz makwando dem wabgoni zagagan nishtabek and donjiba. I'm Lindsay Bain. I'm the regulatory manager in the Territorial Planning Unit at Grand Council Treaty 3. I'm also a member of Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation and a board member of OAIA. Just wanted to add a follow-up to the comments around significance, I think is how you framed it, what is significant impact or not needing to be engaged on every proposed road. And I know this was echoed yesterday as well, but just it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all application everywhere to any nation that you go. That's why it really does have to be grassroots and engagement with the nations where they're at. In Treaty 3, anything that impacts the land has to be compliant to Manitowoc-Kiyonaknagewin, which is our Great Earth Law. So anytime you're doing work or considering work, it should be co-development, co-creation, and co-design right from early planning stages. So your engagement needs to be as early as possible, if not before you even have much of an idea, so that you are being compliant to Manitowoc-Kiyonaknagewin, that you are having consent by the nations, that you are moving forward in compliance to not just our Earth Law, but all Anishinaabe and Oknagewan, all of our laws. Everything is interconnected, and they're not just rights that we have, but responsibilities that we have to uphold as, in my territory, Anishinaabe people. And we, again, are not like anti-development, but just making sure that things are done in a good way and done sustainably, which means following our protocols and developing projects that make sure that we have access to our land and we're able to exercise our rights for future generations to come as well. Miigwech.
You forgot to mention you also work with us too, but that's okay.
What's that?
You forgot to mention you work here too. Hurt me a little bit. Anything else? Don't be shy. This is the time. If not, pull me aside in the hallway, because I know people get really awkward when they have all these questions, right? We try not to make it an awkward space, but it gets awkward. Jillian, come up to the mic, Jillian. Don't be shy.
Benefit of going out for the walk this morning with you and learned a lot, but maybe you could share some of you were talking about the river, the salmon that would look, that you said they were not, you call them invasive, they were not the right species or whatever, right. And the crane, and could you, I thought it was important, I mean, it's too bad everybody couldn't go.
Okay, so when we went to the Humber River, it is a historical Atlantic salmon river. The Mississauga people are the people of the big river mouths, or the people of the salmon. We were the first people affected by colonialization, by the removal of salmon by the Europeans, and it happened at Niagara Falls as well as all along the north shore of Lake Ontario, with the emphasis on Clarington, Darlington, Pickering, and Wilmot Creek, those watersheds. Our people inhabited. There's actually a burial site. Where am I here? Just right over there, at the bend for all those nice houses. So we talked about that. We actually talked about the state of water and how there's no water. That was a historical canoe route for us now, and you don't even need rubber boots to walk across the river now because of the permit to take water process has dewatered our territory so badly and broke the Constitution. Right, that we have the inability to actually launch a canoe and paddle to navigate the river. That's interesting. How many people do permit to take water applications in the room as part of their job, or they have them on their projects? Right? Who would have thought you'd break the Constitution every day when you go to work now, right, of Canada? Horrible, right? But that's the reality of it. That's this awkward truth of part of reconciliation. I talked about how the river is unhealthy, right? I actually teach the river courses, how to sample rivers sustainably for all the CAs in the province. The river's unhealthy, and I said, why is the river unhealthy? Why is it telling us? And someone in the audience and the crowd said, there's only rock. That's right, our rivers are not full of sediment. Our rivers historically had sediment in it, right? That's what actually shows that they're healthy. My buddy and I are writing a book right now to fish the salmon rivers made of sand, not the rivers of stone. That's the history of the Great Lakes. It's not rock, right? Things like that. And I also talked about a large furry creature that was the second species ever removed from the Mississauga people for harvesting. Does anybody know what that species is on Lake Ontario? Besides the people who are with me, that doesn't count. That's horrible. It's cheating, just so you guys know. Does anybody know what big furry mammal species that was removed from Lake Ontario by settlers, especially around the Oshawa area? Large furry mammal. I'm looking at the other Mississauga table and they're like, what the hell is Gary talking about? It was, what's that? I'm whispering about me. It was the seal, the harbor seal. We had harbor seals in Lake Ontario. They followed the salmon, right? Now because of a certain dam by a certain proponent here in the room, they can never return to Lake Ontario. They're removed from Port of Oshawa and destroyed, and now we can only find their DNA about a meter down. That's all that's left. That was captured in our artwork, captured in DNA and oral histories of Europeans as they congregated the shoreline. The Port of Oshawa was the big seal colony for Lake Ontario, right? Things that you don't remember of your past that we still talk about today. We also talked about the importance of art, and my friend Cammie, I don't know where she is, I can't see her, but we actually found a piece of art, my brother and I, at the Value Village in Peterborough, made by our cousins for $7. We have the whole oral history of the bank swallow. Bet you MECP would love to get their hands on that. We found it at Value Village, and I looked at my brother and said, that looks like a bank swallow. I think we should buy this at $7, right? For the little price of a pumpkin spice latte, we can take this home. And I cut open the picture, and my cousin Norman, when he made all the artwork, he'd actually put the oral history behind it, and there it was, right? As soon as I told someone at MECP that I know is a buddy of mine, I had 7 MECP employees called up wanting to extract that knowledge from my house. And I said, okay, we need to hide this and we're going to use this for leverage later on, right? But that's still that extractive process. MECP found out they wanted it from me. They felt entitled to have our oral history of the bank swallow. Because if you Google bank swallow Indigenous knowledge, MECP and Wildlife Federation of Canada actually state there is no Indigenous knowledge of bank swallow. It actually says that on the internet. I saved that because I was like, that's the easiest species at risk report I've ever read. But then I'm like, oh, here it is at Valley Village. I was like, look at that, right? Things like that. Ask those questions. Artwork is super important, right? Anything else? No, good. Time up. Good. Get me out of here.
Violetta's giving me the
Is she giving you that? I'm like, well, yeah. I'm like, say something, God. By the way, just so you know, my biggest fear was letting her down for time this morning. I was like, oh my God.
Thank you, Gary, so much. Really lovely conversation, so thanks, everybody. We're on to session 7. You can see on the screen there are bronze sponsors who we want to thank so much for sponsoring this section of the agenda. So WCS Canada, Arup, Intrinsic, Parsons, and UBC Sear. So thank you guys. So I'll invite Catherine, my WSP twin, to come back up to moderate our session 7, which is focused on data and technology.
All right, great. We've got some folks coming up. So if I could get Sabrina, Jessica, Greg, Sonja, Kendra, Rebecca, Mark, and Beth. And I'm just wondering if we could get an extra chair. We might be short a little bit. Yeah, Beth can just stay here. I'll stay here after the break. We're after the break, yeah. Mark and I. We'll figure out the chair. Okay, perfect. So technology and how that fits into the EA process, I think, is a really exciting topic. We're surrounded by a lot of technology, whether it's social media or artificial intelligence, all sorts of different opportunities to see how we can improve the way how we work. So I'm excited to introduce our panel here. We're going to have 4 presentations, starting off with technology in the EA process, where to focus, by the Dillon team. So we've got Sabrina Wong, Jessica Wright, and Greg Hayes presenting. So Sabrina is an RPP with Dillon Consulting. She's led environmental assessments, environmental management, and municipal and land use planning projects across Ontario for 20 years. Her most recent work has focused on transit projects in the GTA, and she enjoys large multidiscipline infrastructure projects. We also have Jessica Wright presenting as well. She's an accomplished associate project manager and environmental scientist at Dillon Consulting with 14 years of experience in environmental sciences and the environmental assessment process. And Greg, we've got as well. He's an associate and environmental planner at Dillon Consulting with 9 years of experience in EA and land use planning. His experience is focused on Class EA studies for provincial municipal roads, bridges, transit, water, wastewater, and related facilities. So now that I've introduced you, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you. Thank you very much. Yeah, you can either click here or use the arrows.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for the introductions. My name is Jessica, and I'm here with my colleagues Sabrina and Greg from Dillon Consulting. And we are excited to be here today to start the conversation and kick off this session on technology. And today our presentation is on technology and the EA process. And we're going to be exploring sort of an overarching question on where to focus. So here's a bit of an overview of our presentation. And the purpose of this presentation is really to set the stage for a bit of a discussion. We're going to have a breakout session right after this presentation. And so for the presentation, we're going to define a bit of the EA process for the purposes of this discussion. We're going to provide some examples of technology that we're using in the EA process, just a couple of examples. We're hoping that many more will come out in the discussions. And then we'll be moving into the breakout discussions, hoping for a lot of really productive discussions and sharing of knowledge and experiences of using technology in the EA process. So we're going to actually start this with a bit of a survey. So I'm going to ask a series of questions, and I'm hoping that everyone can raise their hands and maybe look around the room just to see how we started with technology. So if you could think back to your university days, your college days, or early in your career, and with a show of hands, how many used a computer? So for those that aren't looking around, like most of us, how many brought a computer to school? So brought a laptop. Okay. How many brought a phone to school? Like not one that you plugged in, like a digital phone. Okay. The numbers are dwindling. And how many went to class virtually? Okay, again, even less. So that's just to give a perspective on technology and how long we've been using it, and when maybe we were all sort of introduced to it. So next, we're going to define the EA process, again, for the purposes of this presentation and this discussion. So we thought it'd be helpful to look at the various steps. So the first step would be the screening process. So is an EA even required? And if so, what process do we need to follow? Scoping, so collecting baseline information and data so that we can understand what the conditions are on the ground. The actual assessment, so identifying impacts, developing mitigation measures. Engagement, speaking to Indigenous communities, stakeholders, and the public about the project. Reporting, preparing technical reports and the overall EA. And then we have monitoring, so any follow-up mitigation measures and other commitments made during construction, pardon me. However, as you're probably aware, it's not such a linear process, and often the process looks a little bit more like that image that I just put up on the screen. So you take a step or two forward, and then you need to take a step back before proceeding. On top of that, we usually have project management, so coordination with your team, a project budget, a project schedule. To make things even more complicated, as many of us know here, there's also regulatory oversight by third-party organizations like MECP. I'm going to turn it over to Greg now to continue us through.
Thanks. So some of the benefits or goals of applying technology in EAs include making them more repeatable and defendable by following a clear, traceable process that can be replicated more easily, making them more transparent by providing accessible or easily understood info to external parties, as well as making them more efficient by reducing the amount of time required to do certain tasks. However, there are some cautions to keep in mind. Technology can introduce new issues, and a few of those are bias, which, so for example, artificial intelligence or AI is trained based on the info that exists on the web. So a lot of that info has biases built in, which can cause AI to have biases as well. So it's important to review and carefully look at the info you're getting from tools like that. Another potential issue is a breach of trust, where people may expect work to be done by a human. So for example, if you're using something like AI to summarize public consultation information, people may have concerns about not having a human do that work and read and summarize things. Another potential issue is privacy concerns. So as always, we need to be careful not to release personally identifiable info, and it's important with technology to be careful on that. And another one is potential loss of jobs. So another thing to keep in mind, increasing efficiency could lead to loss of jobs. And related to this is the potential for loss of technical expertise or an impact on the ability to train people using entry-level work that may be done by technology in the future. So an example of that would be using something like AI to summarize technical reports into an EA report. So rather than having an environmental planner, reading that and summarizing it in their own words, getting technology to do that instead might prevent some of the learning that happens when you need to do that yourself. So yeah, overall, technology can offer major benefits to the EA process, but it's important to apply it carefully and be mindful of potential unintended consequences. One example of a common technology used in EAs is digital data collection. So using GIS tools, data can be collected on smartphones and tablets by field staff, reducing the effort required for data management after the fact. Things like photos and other data can be tagged to specific locations this way, and GIS data can be updated real time, allowing other team members to have access to info right away. And then another benefit of digital data collection is that field staff can also have easy access to GIS data when they're in the field. Another example we'd like to highlight is the use of augmented reality, or AR, which can be beneficial for engagement. So AR allows for info to be overlaid onto real-world environments. So in the photo on the right, we used an app called Jigspace to allow people to overlay a hydro tower anywhere they want using their smartphones. And this was helpful for people to get an idea of what a hydro tower might look like on their property or in an area where it's proposed. And AR can also be used for things like virtual walkthroughs of a design or even like immersive virtual meetings. I'll pass it over to Sabrina now to talk about the breakout.
Great, and so now we are going to pass it over to everybody here because we are not the experts on tech. We've heard a lot of great presentations over the last day and a half on different uses of technology, and we really want to benefit from us being together in a room to be able to talk to each other. So we want to know what have you tried? What's working? What's not working? What are you concerned about? What plans have you put in place maybe to address some of your concerns related to technology? And so what we are going to be doing is we have on each table, we've broken the different phases or steps in the EA process. There is a piece of paper on your table that outlines which phase of the process we would like you to discuss. And we also, we have we're going to be using a program called Mural. So it's a way to report out your discussion. So if you can, there's a QR code to help you download that program. We also have pieces of paper because sometimes technology is not always our friend. And we know sometimes just using a piece of paper and pen when you're trying to facilitate a discussion may be the best approach. So you can use this, use Mural app, or you can use a piece of paper. And what we'll be doing is we're not going to report out today because we don't have enough time, but we will be taking all the feedback and we'll be running the input provided through some different generative AI, different pieces of technology, and we'll post the results as part of our presentation to the OAIA website. And we will also show you how we've generated those results. So which programs we've used, what prompts we've used, so to give you some ideas of different ways to summarize information using technologies. So we also have a few other Dillon colleagues here who are going to help support if there's any support you need on using Mural or any other prompts you'd like for the discussion. So we would encourage you as well, you're welcome to either stay at your current table, or if there's one of these steps in the process that you're very interested in, to move to the table where that is being discussed. So we've generally laid it out from screening is on this side of the room, and then works across the room to regulatory, what's my last one? Regulatory oversight is at this table. So you can take a few minutes trying to figure out where you'd like to have your discussion. And then, but is there any questions? I guess this kind of makes sense what we're looking for you to do. So we really want you to take advantage of being together and sharing your knowledge with each other.
Thanks all. So I'm going to hand it back over to my other Catherine, and we're going to continue with session 7. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you. Oh, great. Well, that was a really great discussion, and I could see everyone in the room was having some really great discussions about technology. So thanks, everyone. So we're going to start the next group of presentations. Sonja? Yeah. Okay, we haven't met personally, so. And Kendra and Rebecca, did you want to join up as well? We're gonna move into our next presentation, which is on open science and data platform empowering Canada's environmental and impact assessment process, presented by Sonja Kosuta. And I'm just gonna open up the presentation here. Okay. So I was just going to do a little intro for you. No worries. So she is a Senior Director of Impact Assessment and Science Capacity at NRCan's Office of the Chief Scientist. In her role, she manages the delivery of the Government of Canada's open science and data platform and coordination of NRCan's science advice to impact assessment and related regulatory processes. She joined OCS in 2022 from her role as Director of Forest Ecology Partnerships and Planning at the Canadian Forest Service in Sault Ste. Marie, and she holds a PhD in molecular biology. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here. Oh my gosh, no need to clap for me yet. You haven't seen anything. So great session so far, and I've really enjoyed all the discussions and meeting all the people that I've met, many different walks of life from the impact assessment world. I want to talk to you today about a digital tool that the federal government developed it started, I think, back in 2016, this idea. Just a quick outline here, but in 2016 there was an expert panel held to gather public and expert opinion on how to make the environmental assessment process better, the federal process. And what was found in that 2016 panel was that there was a real lack of public confidence in the environmental assessment process. Confidence in the decision-making, confidence in the information that was used to inform those processes. And you can see the numbers there, pretty dismal, like more than 2/3 of people did not have confidence. And the biggest challenge that was identified was a real lack of transparency in the process, but also in the data, in the information that was being used to inform these processes. The solution to this was seen to be the development of data sharing or information sharing tools, digital tools that would render the amazing volume of data and information produced not just by the federal government, but throughout the impact assessment process, public, not just during the impact assessment process itself, but now and forever to inform future processes. And hence, this data platform was created. The work started, in 2019, but it went live in 2021. And this is a project that's co-led by Natural Resources Canada and Environment and Climate Change Canada on behalf of the 14 federal departments and agencies that participate in federal impact assessment processes. But we've also partnered with all of the provinces and territories to bring their open data into the platform. And so it's not a repository of data and information, it's kind of like a clearinghouse. It's a platform where we surface, we've linked directly to all those open data sources that are held by many different departments and many provinces and territories. Right now, as of today, we have over 8,000 databases and nearly 150,000 records. Some data is geo-enabled. A lot of data is geo-enabled, which allows the innovative map viewer to layer different data sets, so you can see the co-localization of different types of data in the same view. And I know a lot of other data platforms have since developed, and I just learned about the Ontario GeoHub, I think it's called, just the other day, which does a similar thing using Ontario's open data. But the advantage of the Open Science and Data Platform with the federal government is that it not only shows the Ontario open data, but you can see all of the federal open data at the same time, and you can use it across all the provinces and territories with their integrated systems. And just the image that you see here is a little bit of an example of what it might look like. And so this is not Ontario, apologies, but it's a quick view of Atlantic Canada, where there are 2 regional assessments currently being undertaken, looking at offshore wind in Nova Scotia and in Newfoundland. And so what you see in this image is a whole bunch of different data sets. We see critical habitat for migratory birds. In red, we see in blue the migratory paths of whales. And the feeding sites, important feeding sites. We see this overlaid with the actual regions that are encompassed by the regional assessments that are being undertaken. And all of those dots that you see, I'm not going to go into detail about the different kinds, but they're all different natural resource development or energy projects, major projects that are in different stages of approval. And I mean, we can zoom in and you can see the differences. There are different symbols for a project that's just been proposed, a project that's, under evaluation, projects that have been approved. And there's lots of other data that we could show. I just took a quick selection of what might be of interest. The Open Science and Data Platform is really designed for a bunch of different users, and so there's of course expert users from the federal science community and provincial and territorial science communities, but Indigenous communities really enjoy using this platform as well because it's very user-friendly, very easy to use. And there's all pre-prepared content collections for specific regions of interest, like Ring of Fire or the Atlantic offshore wind, where we've pulled together the different data sets that are of most particular interest. So you don't even have to do the legwork. It's already been done. Now, we talk in today's world about regulatory efficiency and how to use the tools available to streamline our processes. And the Open Science and Data Platform supports that efficiency in many, many different ways. As you all can appreciate, having all the data in one place, in one available through one window, really facilitates just the early stages of pre-planning and planning. It can be used to support engagements with the public and with Indigenous communities, with anybody in the project environment. It, of course, supports the decision that's made because all the data is there, and not just the data, but all the regulatory registries, or the federal regulatory registries, are also surfaceable through the Open Science and Data Platform, so that information's there as well. And then post-decision, where conditions are imposed and there's follow-up programs. The Open Science and Data Platform also provides access to monitoring site information for water quality, air quality, and various other biophysical indicators, which then can be used to track those follow-up conditions and as part of your post-decision program. And of course, there's post-federal impact assessment permitting processes, and the same principles apply. Having all the data there in one place to support those different permitting processes is equally valid and equally important. And we're working with various departments in the federal government who hold the regulatory authority, DFO and ECCC and others, to integrate even more user-friendly interface that will tie in the permitting requirements, be able to direct people, proponents in particular, to the data that would be relevant, so that it brings everything all together in one place, making it easier for everyone. Just another very quick view of the diversity of data that's available through the Open Science and Data Platform. This is the high frequency or high speed rail project, depending on who you talk to these days, that's being proposed. And there's a few different views. One, I'll just go through them in a bit more detail, which shows some of the infrastructure. This is shows the built infrastructure. This view also shows those project sites, so different hydroelectric or other energy generating sites. So important infrastructure from a built infrastructure perspective, as well as important transportation network elements. And here we show the same landscape, but with a biophysical lens. So the light green and dark green splotches are protected and conserved areas. The red are the critical habitat for fish in the St. Lawrence, and the purple are flood regions that are flood zones along the St. Lawrence. And we don't know exactly what the route of that rail project will take, but certainly having all of the data together in one picture can help evaluate different route options in terms of how impactful those might be to all of these different elements and more. And I should mention that we also have socioeconomic indicators through data that's available through NRCan, health indicator data available through Health Canada, and much more. And with that, I'll leave you just a few questions. How can we better leverage this open data and open science and data resource for better decision making overall, both at the federal but also at your provincial and municipal levels? And where do you see this fitting into this landscape of efficiency that we find ourselves in, and the kind of provincial, territorial, federal, municipal partnerships that we all strive to build, and Indigenous community partnerships as well. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Sonja. We're just going to switch over to our next presentation. Okay. So welcome back, Kendra. Presentation number 2. So we're going to be hearing a presentation called CNSC Engagement Through Environmental Protection Reviews. And Kendra will be speaking again along with Rebecca. And Rebecca is a senior policy officer at the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. Previously, Rebecca held positions with the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, ERM Consultants, and with mining companies in Ontario and British Columbia. So welcome to Kendra and Rebecca. Come on up.
Hi everyone, me again. Different topic this time, but I am going to try to make it short just so that you're not stuck sitting here listening to me talk any longer than necessary. So I am joined by my colleague Rebecca, and today we're going to be discussing the CNSC's Environmental Protection Review Reports, and more specifically, we're going to be looking at how we use these reports as a type of tool to support our outreach and our engagement activities at the CNSC. So we are going to chat just really quickly about the CNSC briefly before we delve more into the topic for today. So the CNSC is the independent regulatory agency that has jurisdiction over all nuclear-related activities and substances in Canada. So that would range from uranium mines and mills, to nuclear power plants, to nuclear waste facilities, all the way to activities such as nuclear medicine programs. So we're responsible for regulating nuclear activities to protect the health, the safety, and the security of Canadians as well as the environment. We're responsible for implementing Canada's international commitments on the peaceful use of nuclear energy, and we also provide objective scientific and regulatory information about our activities. So the CNSC is made up of two different components, the first being CNSC staff and the other being the CNSC's independent commission. So the commission is an administrative tribunal and also a court of record, and they are responsible for making decisions regarding nuclear facilities across the country. And then we also have CNSC staff, so that would include Rebecca and I, and we're responsible for the assessment and the compliance of nuclear activities in Canada, and we also provide information and recommendations to the Commission to help them inform their decision making. So this slide here illustrates the different types of environmental reviews that can apply to nuclear facilities in Canada. So the CNSC does require that all environmental effects of nuclear facilities and activities be considered and evaluated when licensing decisions are made. And so we do conduct environmental reviews for all license applications. So the type of environmental review that would be required varies, and it really does depend on the location, the scale, and the complexity of the proposed activity, as well as its associated environmental risks. So for today's presentation, we're really just going to focus solely on that third box there, which is the environmental protection reviews. We call them EPRs for short. And so EPRs are evidence-based technical assessments that are conducted by CNSC staff as per the Nuclear Safety and Control Act. I will say that we do conduct EPRs for both proposed new nuclear facilities and existing facilities. So for proposed facilities, we would conduct an environmental protection review if the proposal does not trigger an integrated assessment under the IAA, nor a federal lands assessment under the IAA. But for the sake of time for today, we're just going to focus our presentation on the EPRs that we conduct regularly for our existing licensed nuclear facilities. So basically, we conduct our EPRs for existing facilities on a 5-year basis. Under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act and based on our regulatory requirements, we do require licensees to update their environmental risk assessment information at least every 5 years. They can do so sooner if ever there's a significant operational change at the facility, but the standard is typically 5 years. And so when we receive that updated information and once we accept it, that's when we would then produce an EPR report, so typically every 5 years. One of our main goals for this presentation is to really highlight the work that we've been doing at the CNSC to make environmental protection information more accessible to Canadians. So we have put in considerable effort over the last few years to evolve and to improve our EPR reports. And again, we're just trying to provide in-depth information on the technical assessments that are conducted by CNSC staff for nuclear facilities. So EPR reports themselves are the vehicle that we use and that tell the story of how we assess whether a licensee is making adequate provisions for the protection of the environment and for the health and safety of Canadians, and whether they're meeting all their regulatory requirements for their facility as well. So we try to focus our EPR reports on items that are of Indigenous public and regulatory interest. So again, our reports have shifted and evolved a lot over the last few years, and the reason for this is that we've had more discussions with nations and communities and with members of the public on their values, their interests, and their concerns. So we try to tailor our reports to ensure that we're touching on the topics of interest to them. Sorry, one moment. I don't know what I did. It's okay. That works. Thank you. So why do we conduct EPR reports? So we have heard from Indigenous nations and communities, as well as members of the public, that there's typically not enough time prior to commission proceedings to review information on environmental protection and information on human health. So we started producing these standalone EPR reports back in 2021, And our goal here is to regularly share with folks a type of snapshot of the current environmental protection information and conditions at the site. So this approach is intended to increase transparency and to build trust. And again, we're just trying to provide regular updates on mostly environmental protection and human health at nuclear facilities. Those are really the two main topics that our reports touch on. So overall, this approach does align with the CNSC's mandate to ensure the protection of the environment and human health, as well as to disseminate objective and scientific information. So I did include a little bit of a photo on the slide here. So that's a snapshot of one of our pathway diagrams. So we do produce these diagrams for all of our EPR reports based on feedback that we've heard, and it's just a way to try to visually represent the existing environmental interactions that are present at site. So again, our EPR reports for existing facilities focus on CNSC staff's technical assessments of a licensee's existing environmental protection measures, and we also include information on our compliance monitoring activities. So I've included a list on the left of the slide here that summarizes some of the key chapters that are typically present across all of our EPR reports for existing facilities. And the figure on the right there is kind of a visual representation of the different inputs that go into our EPR reports. So you'll see there that we have the licensee's environmental risk assessment information and documentation, and we also have CNSC compliance monitoring activities. We also do refer to independent verification activities to help inform our EPR reports. So that would include relevant regional health studies, the CNSC's independent environmental monitoring program, so sampling plans and sampling results. We also include information on other environmental monitoring programs when possible, so that would include both Indigenous-led and community-led programs, and also Indigenous knowledge studies when available and shared with CNSC staff. So I will pass the presentation over to my colleague Rebecca to continue.
Thanks, Kendra. So as Kendra mentioned, CNSC staff use the EPRs as a tool to support our engagement and consultation activities, and we disseminate them in different ways, such as during public engagement activities, meetings with Indigenous nations and communities, and posting on our social media and on our website. We're also open to adapting our approach for engagement to share the information and engage different audiences in ways that work for them. So as an example, in 2022, at the suggestion of an Indigenous nation, CNSC staff worked with the nation to produce a 2-page pamphlet that visually highlights the key findings from the chemical fuel manufacturing EPR. And we're now developing similar pamphlets for our other EPRs. So the pamphlet on the slide, for example, is one that was developed for the Darlington Waste Management Facility in Ontario, which was published in 2022. In addition, the EPRs are also posted on the Government of Canada's Open Government Portal. So the image on the slide is of the CNSC's Open Government Portal page. The Open Government Portal is a central place for government departments to share information and promotes information management practices that enable the proactive and ongoing release of information to the public. Currently, the CNSC has over 30 open information and open data records on the Open Government Portal, including our EPR reports in HTML and PDF formats. We also post other information. So for example, the results of our IMP program are posted, as well as our RIMNet initiative, which is the Regional Information and Monitoring Network. And the CNSC has flagged that our use of the Open Government Portal is a priority for the coming years to ensure that Canadians have easy access to the CNSC's data and information that they're most interested in. So the EPR reports have also proven to be a very useful tool for public outreach and engagement activities around nuclear facilities. So on the slide there is an image of an event that Kendra participated in, actually. So where we would present the information and discuss the results from the EPR reports and share printouts of the pamphlets. The EPR reports have also been a tool for increasing transparency and trust building between Canadians and the CNSC. So, for example, interventions to the Commission from Indigenous nations and communities and the public on licensing matters do sometimes reference the EPR reports for the nuclear facility in question, which indicates that the reports are being used by Canadians who want to learn more about the environmental protection measures that are in place at the facilities. By having EPR information readily accessible for existing facilities, it will also assist in building trust, awareness, and transparency with the public and Indigenous nations and communities as new major nuclear facilities are proposed in Canada. As per the CNSC's Indigenous Knowledge Policy Framework, the CNSC does recognize the importance of considering and including Indigenous knowledge in all aspects of its regulatory process, including the EPRs. So CNSC staff are committed to working directly with nations and communities on integrating their knowledge, values, land use information, and perspectives into the EPRs, where appropriate and where shared with the licensee and the CNSC. So we've met with Indigenous nations and communities to discuss the reports as they're being developed, and have worked with nations to improve the reports and include information that they would like to see. We also engage with nations and communities once the reports are complete to share information and results and understand their perspectives. So in addition to engaging on the reports themselves, many of the EPR inputs, which Kendra mentioned on a previous slide, also have Indigenous engagement components. So for example, the licensee's environmental risk assessments, which are key components of the EPRs, should consider and reflect Indigenous knowledge, and the CNSC encourages this as a best practice to ensure that Indigenous knowledge is considered very early on in the EPR process. Nuclear licensees may also have Indigenous-led monitoring programs on site that could be reflected in the ERAs and the EPRs. And the CNSC is also beginning to collaborate more and learn more about community-based monitoring programs, which could lead to their further inclusion into EPRs going forward. Kendra mentioned the IEMP as well. So the CNSC engages directly with nations on the IEMP by providing them with sampling plans in advance to seek their views on them and to provide revisions to them. We also invite the nations to come out and participate in the IEMP sampling activities with us. So the slide shows an image of a water sample being collected as part of the IEMP. And finally, the CNSC would definitely also consider any Indigenous knowledge studies or Indigenous knowledge shared directly with us while we're drafting the EPRs. In order to ensure that nations and communities have the capacity to participate in these activities, the CNSC provides funding through the ISCF program and PFP. And we do recognize as well that there's not always interest to participate, but we work with the interested nations within our capacity to ensure that they're able to and have capacity to do so. So in terms of going forward, our team is always open to looking to build and improve upon how we conduct environmental reviews and how we share this information with the public and Indigenous nations. So for example, we've recently included a section on climate change into our newest EPR report for the Pickering nuclear site, which is an improvement that we worked on with our Environmental Risk Assessment Division and something that we will continue to implement going forward. Some of the other areas where we hope to improve upon include integration of Indigenous knowledge into our reports where appropriate, adding clear definitions of risk and safety limits into our reports, and also on finding different opportunities for sharing the reports so that the public is aware of the information and how it's accessible to them. So we've established an internal EPR working group to address these opportunities for improvements, and we always welcome any feedback or suggestions from the public or Indigenous nations and communities on how we can improve our process. So to conclude, our EPR reports are useful tools for Canadians to familiarize themselves with the environmental protection measures in place at nuclear facilities, and we look forward to continuing to improve our reports and working closely with nations and communities and the public to ensure they are accessible and focus on the items that are most important to readers. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you very much to both Kendra and Rebecca. We're going to be moving to our last presentation of this series. I'm just going to pull it up here. I'll just ask Beth and Mark to come up. So Mark is the Chief Information Officer at the TRCA. He's worked and consulted in municipal government and public sector service for over 25 years. And he's implemented corporate systems and technology solutions in asset management, business intelligence, information and records management, user-friendly enterprise resource planning systems, and customer engagement. So a wealth of knowledge in that avenue. Beth is the Associate Director of Infrastructure Planning and Permits with the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. She's worked as an environmental planner with the TRCA for the past 33 years and has worked as a conservation land management planner, watershed planner, and a development review planner. And right now she's establishing and managing partnerships with infrastructure builders across the GTA. So thanks so much. I'll let you guys take over.
Thank you. Putting on my other hat. I'm actually going to do a little bit of a different introduction to me. We were all asked the question, when did we first have a computer? Did we have it at university? I would like to say yes, I did. In the end of second year, going into third, we had a very innovative professor who said, when you come back, you're required to bring a personal computer. And there were a few of us that went, uh-oh, what does that mean? Thankfully, I had a very good friend who understood that, and he actually bought one for me. I paid him back. And it was a desktop, had the big yellow font on the screen, came with a dot matrix printer, you know, the ones that you had to rip off the sides. So third year, I had a computer. I hope that sort of resonates with everybody, because what you're about to hear Mark and I present is kind of a big deal from that perspective. We're really moving forward into, at TRCA, taking our plan review systems into being completely digital. We have developed, you heard the first part of this presentation last year when we were introducing it. Now we have actually launched pairs to staff. We launched it on May 10th, and we've been working through the system online with our internal planning and technical review teams, doing our own intake, doing the circulations, and then sending out the materials to our clients. So we're here right now. We're actually considering this really a prolonged staff training and testing phase. We trained about 150 staff, and they're all working on it now. It goes across the organization. It's not just the planning teams and infrastructure and development planning, and then our technical teams of our engineering teams and our ecology teams, our PMO, our conservation lands, our property teams. They're using it, they're actually doing some of their own reviews in it as well, and we're refining it along the way. That's obviously not going to be a perfect first launch, and everybody's very patient, and we have some big group meetings. They used to be every couple of weeks, now they're monthly, just to continue to tweak the details. We're getting ready for, toward the end of Q1, we'll be launching the customer service portal. And we're quite excited about that, so that our clients will be able to apply online and do the review online. We'll very shortly we've re-engaged with our external guidance team, and very shortly we'll be actually having them starting to work in the system. So, what is PAIRS? New for some of you, a reminder for others. So it's a cloud-based system. It's done by Tyler Technologies, formerly Energov. It's a platform that's out of the US that has come to different municipalities in Canada. Richmond Hill within the GTA is one that works with it as well. So we're looking forward to, in the future, working with Richmond Hill as a starting point, we hope, and trying to integrate our systems so the intake could be automatic between the two agencies. We can do this because we're building it with APIs, and so we'll have those connection points that we can reach out to the systems of others. I think Peter referenced earlier that the ministry is looking at having an online portal and online reviews. Hopefully we can do this with the ministry. Hopefully it can continue beyond what we're building right now. The portal will be available within our website. It's going to be quite simple and quite integrated and quite intuitive. The service transformation, not we all. I started in a very paper-based organization where in fact we didn't even have a listing of our projects in order, centrally filed. So that's really where I started, and we got things into a central filing system. We used Lotus Notes. We're still using Lotus Notes. Then we got our application forms digitized and into PDFs, interactive PDFs. We thought that was really avant-garde at the time. And now moving into the portal, where these reviews are interactive and they work with clients and we can do live reviews and live meetings is our next stage. The stage started, well, since time began, but it really started in about 2008 when we knew that technology was changing and shifting. It was just super expensive. So we started then getting our applications into a digital format, working in Laserfish, saving things in that way, doing our, when Microsoft came out with their SharePoints and their Teams, we moved directly in that. When COVID hit, we'd actually transitioned out of desktops and into laptops and tablets years before. We literally just picked it up and went home and started to work again. We didn't miss a beat. And so PAIRS is really our next corporate evolution to that. We're currently have either finished the integration of, or we're working on integrations of a number of different corporate systems. Am I transitioning to you now, or I keep going? It's okay. Okay. Just kick me, except for you're far away. So ArcGIS, so there's an interactive mapping system. We're putting your projects into the GIS, so we have georeferenced mapping of all of the projects. That translates to our enforcement team when we have the permits. Our enforcement team can go out into the field with their tablets, and they can look up what their site is. They can do their sites. They can see all the other sites in the same geographic area. They can, really maximize their time and efficiencies in terms of driving around our jurisdiction. And if they see something that they really need to take a deeper dive in that kind of shouldn't be there, they can record that and track that as well. So Laserfish is our record management system. PAIRS is not a record management system, it's a project management tracking system. And there's a big difference. We don't know quite yet how we'll upload our PAIRS information into our Laserfish system. That's something that'll come next year. The payments, it's going to be easy. You're going to click a button, maybe even Apple Pay, I don't know. I just got it. Kind of excited. But our payments will be online and they'll be very, very simple. There's no more phoning in your credit card number. Dayforce, that's how we do our time management. There's exploratory ideas about how to integrate with Dayforce. And then, of course, the workflows and forms. We had going into, and this is really my advice for anybody who thinks they might want to develop an online system or portal, we used Visio and we created unbelievably detailed workflows of every step of the way, and then we compiled that into a Lotus Notes system and we gave that to the vendor. And what got programmed really is incredibly detailed on multiple different levels of applications and types of applications, different types of EA reviews. It allows for things that are coming in from different sectors, and it streamlines whether it's designating regulation application or municipal class EA application or different types of permits, different levels of review. It streamlines it through the workflows, and the amount of time and effort that we took to do that was worth it, so that when we gave it to the vendor and what they costed, we have not gone over cost in our project. It's taken a little bit longer to do it right, but the costing has stayed on budget, which I think is pretty unique. The reporting, we're building them now, the different dashboards. Planners and technical staff have their dashboards so that they can see what's due, what their timing is, what's coming up next. The inspections, our enforcement team has their dashboards, and we're working on what our external clients will see, and we're working on how to get our corporate metrics efficiently for some of the deliverables that we have. Our templated letters, permit reports, permit letters, they're all going into the system so that the common information will just be read and create the letters into templates, and then we'll have to refine them, obviously, and sign them. But removing the redundancy of copy typing and some of the edits required. And then the Pairs Knowledge Hub, this is behind the scenes. This is where we're filing all our different SOPs or our Q&A spreadsheets and working with our ITRM staff, which Mark will speak to, and keeping our knowledge and our learning straight, and also having training platforms for when we have new staff that have to become involved in pairs so that they can work within the system. Some standard modules and then modules for each of the different teams working within pairs.
Thanks. Great, thanks, Beth. So Beth gave you a great description of the things that we set out to achieve in the project and some of the transformations that we were trying to push the organization through. So she covered some of the things that I'll talk to, but I'll give you the visuals and show you kind of what we've accomplished and what our staff are seeing, and the things that they're still adjusting to over the last 6 months, and then a little highlight of what's coming next and moving forward with the systems. All right. So I think the biggest accomplishment implementing this system is that we now have really a 360-degree view of all of our activities for staff. Every staff member gets a version of this dashboard that keeps track of all of the ongoing work that's been assigned to them, what the tasks are that are laid out that they have to accomplish, and they interact directly with all of their colleagues to keep moving work along. And this dashboard, central kind of station that everybody comes to, really does all of the work to keep things on track for people, and also will roll up and give management and Beth's teams to a full picture of what's happening all the way through the processes. Right. You get underneath the covers beyond the dashboard, and you're working directly into your applications and files. I mentioned that you can track your progress all the way through. So every plan type and work class that's broken out into the system to track the different kinds of applications we have all have workflows assigned to them, and then subtasks that we track along the way. It's customizable on the fly if you have something that's unique that you have to build into your process, but everybody can keep track of their work, and everything gets marked as people accomplish tasks, and then rolls up, and you can highlight when things are going off track and do follow-ups within the system and keep things really on track as you're moving along. It gives us a lot more control in managing our clients and contacts. In our previous legacy systems, it was very limited. It was just literally electronic versions of paper files or paper applications. But we can track all of the people that have different roles on the file, whether they're billing contacts, they're the project managers, they're the engineers, there's the lawyers, anything that's connected to the project in terms of a client relationship can get tracked here. And this, in the future, through the portal, they'll also have roles where they can access the files and interact with us on the questions that they're going to be asked to. So this is really a big change for us to manage that, the whole dimension of who interacts on the files. We've done a lot of work integrating our screening process. So obviously behind the scenes, we do a lot of work. There's a lot of circulation work that happens, and a lot of work that happens in our GIS systems as well. We've done a fair bit of work having more of a seamless integration to GIS through the Tyler system. We still have some work to do, and we've made some improvements in some of our platforms that I'll talk about in a sec that will allow more of a two-way integration. But there's a lot more connection to what people see on the files and the documents they're managing and the decisions they're making directly into the work that they're doing with GIS and the screening process. Just another extension of all the online reviews and the way we can collaborate. We've also implemented Bluebeam Studio Prime, so we can do collaborative markups on files and keep activity going with our clients as well as with multiple people inside the organization. So everybody's working on the same item. It's one view of what's happening. The planners have full control over the markups as they grow along, and then they can publish them back to the clients. But this is a new tool that's really starting to change how people work. So they're not simply passing out versions to each other and trying to collect the comments. It's all happening on one view of the world. The system also supports all of our enforcement business as well. So on tracking and scheduling inspections that come out of our planning files and permitting files, goes right into a module for our enforcement, and they can do dynamic scheduling and visualize exactly where all of their inspections are happening directly into all of the past inspections that have happened in terms of all the ratings that they've done. So they see exactly the same data that the planners have been working on, and everything is fully informed. And then as processes get closed off, the inspections get finished, then everything closes the loop back on the main files. All right, just a couple things on what we're working now. Beth's already talked about the customer portal access that we'll be rolling out. So we're just doing the preparations for that with our engagement teams and getting our clients slowly access to help really do a live trial of the system and then help improve it for a full rollout in kind of the first quarter next year is kind of the target. It's going to allow our clients to interact, submit applications, provide information, do versions of their documents, interact with the planners electronically. And we've always made the case as we presented this to other groups that this isn't intended to become a barrier and force people to work electronically with us and put up a wall. This will work side by side with all of our regular contact mechanisms, face-to-face meetings, phone. We just don't want to create that barrier, but this will allow everybody to see the same information. For clients who don't really know how to navigate our processes, there's going to be an online self-guided tour or process to guide people through questions on what they actually need to submit and what application forms they need to use. So you don't have to be an expert to get into the system. The system will actually guide you directly to the types of processes that you need to engage on. Beth already mentioned all our online invoicing and payments, so that's another extension that'll be going live when the portal goes live. And just as the wrap up, this is just really a larger extension of our full website, and I'll just maybe switch to that now. So obviously we're doing a full rewrite of our planning information on our main website, because not only are we changing how people are interacting with us, but we've realized we can really move forward and change the content that we're presenting to people to make it simpler for people to understand and give them the right information. And the portal is actually going to carry a lot more of the details that really we're just filling up the website anyway. There was so much information, people would be contacting us and asking for help to navigate. Now we're really balancing things across the website and now the new portal. Okay, 2 seconds. Some quick new things that we're building capabilities forward. We've upgraded all of our ArcGIS services, and we've adopted new portal technologies. So as I mentioned, this is going to improve our full integration with Tyler, and have more data access, more mapping and analysis and workflows, and make things a lot more efficient, and actually the performance is a lot better with this new architecture. We're automating all of our map production, so we're doing some work with canopy mapping, and this will help take some redundant work out of the planning hands to generate all of the reports that will go into their board reports and the approvals process as well. So that should be going live in the next couple of weeks. We've also done some proof of concepts with all of our Power BI dashboard technologies and extracted all of our legacy data. So we're getting a new picture of what planning looks like from all of our history. And we focused on our enforcement team to look at some metrics, but that's been something new that we're looking to explore well in the future. So I'll just turn it back to Beth and she can do the wrap up.
Okay. In terms of what's next, we will launch our customer service portal Q1. A big push following the launch, other than working out the bugs, will be we really do want to integrate with municipal and agency partners. We've had a number of partners approach us saying, when can we start to talk about this? We said, let's get it rolled out first. But we also know that we're quite advanced. There aren't a lot of other agencies or municipalities out there. There are no other conservation authorities out there with this type of system. So we're definitely at the forefront. Integrating the other systems, and then developing some new services. So working with our property team to develop a property portal so you can get PTEs, things like that. GRCA is the biggest landholder in the GTA, so there's a lot of property requests that come through infrastructure building. That'll be a big module for us in the future. And just continued refinement. And that is the end of PAIRS.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting to see how the system, having worked in a municipality, I know how those applications get processed. So it's exciting to see that that'll help both sides of the customers and the staff. So I think we are a little bit past our original time slot for the Q&A, but I think we're okay. So I invite anyone to come up to the microphones with any questions on any of the presentations after the break, but as well if anyone wants to share any particular ideas around technology that came up before the break, please come up and share those. I know there's some emerging technologies that might be interesting for others to hear about. So I'll give everyone a moment to come up.
I'm really interested in this technology that we're using. The first computer I had was a mouse trap. Did it itself, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at that mouse trap, we interpret it all a different way. And when you gather this information and you start storing it, it leaves it open for interpretation from another time, another place. Even though it's the same place you took the picture or the water sample, it's going to be different in the future. And so how long a shelf life will you put on your data?
That might be a good question for a few of the presenters, I feel like. Sonja, did you want to speak to that a little bit in terms of your data?
Yeah. So, is this working? Yeah? Okay. That's a great question. And of course, as we all know, with the proliferation of data, we're kind of drowning in it. And so data storage, keeping all of that data has become a bigger and bigger issue. But in principle, so my site, my Open Science and Data Platform, surfaces data that is held on in the repository of the data producer. So, the data that we surfaced from Health Canada is sitting on the Health Canada cloud or in the Health Canada repository. The data that we surfaced from the province of Ontario is sitting on the province's repository. So all of those data retention requirements will be slightly different, but in principle, the data goes back as long as we've been collecting. So for those water quality monitoring readings or air quality readings that are surfaced through the OSDP, it goes back to when those readings were first digitized. I can't say exactly what year, but in principle it goes back as far as that data has been in digital form, and as long as the producers of the data are keeping it and making it available. I hope that answers from my perspective. And,
any others want to speak?
CNSC on our site, but go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I can speak to that just a little bit. Thank you for that question. I think that's a great perspective to bring. I think our point of view for the EPR reports, again, is a little bit of a snapshot in time. Nuclear facilities, especially large nuclear facilities, are typically sites where there's a lot of monitoring and a lot of data collection. And as Sonja said, sometimes that can be a little bit overwhelming. So even though we do share the raw data online as much as possible, the goal of the EPR reports is to kind of provide a little bit of a summary or a hopefully easier to digest outlook on the information that we've collected in our assessments. And again, we do them every 5 years for our major nuclear facilities that we license. So they typically look back on the 5 years prior as a snapshot in time. But of course, we do also consider and look at trends or topics that span longer than that, and we try to ensure that they're reflected in the EPR reports. But I think our goal is to just kind of update them every 5 years and hopefully have that be a little bit of an easier place for folks to go to kind of get a bit more information on environmental protection at the sites. But I say that, of course, being open to any feedback or suggestions. Don't hesitate to come up to Rebecca and I at the end of the session as well if there's any thoughts. But maybe I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I can answer sort of for TRCA. Like yourselves, we have retention schedules where we will keep the information on what's required according to legislation. The reports that we get and the data that we get from a planning perspective, we do keep them as part of the planning files, but we would also rely on whoever actually owns that data to have that data within their filing system. We were, I think, quite fortunate. We are moving to a new build head office, and in the process we've moved to a temporary office, moving back, and became an almost paperless environment. And it's quite a fascinating experience, but it's also meant we've digitized a lot and put it into our Laserfiche system. So we have those records available and accessible, but they are all in a digital form, or almost all in a digital form right now. So I don't know if you want to add from a...
Just from a visibility, so I think we've mentioned we've been able to harvest a lot of our data, and Beth just spoke to that too, of our planning information. So we're definitely retaining the decisions and what went into the planning process that are going to be visible. We're also working with the divisions from my group to see what more we can present publicly to break down those barriers, because we do have a lot of information that we can certainly share out and make it easier for people. So we're still working with the groups to make sure that we're presenting things in the right way and it's giving the right information and not creating kind of the wrong context. So we're definitely, you'll see more and more come forward from TRCA, whether it's through open data or just routine disclosures or just things we can present that will allow people to see the activity that's going on in the organization too. So that's ongoing for us.
That's great. I think one of the themes that came up at our table when we were having that breakout session group was how to cater to different comfort levels with technology. And I was just curious if any of the panel members have any thoughts on sort of how to reach the people who aren't digitally savvy and what other alternatives there are for sort of addressing both the really exciting innovations of technology, but also not leaving out the ones who aren't able to participate.
Sure, yeah, so I guess we talked a little bit about the pamphlets that we had developed for the EPR reports. So generally we would approach nations to see what works best for them to disseminate the information within the community. We could also have like information sessions with community members to share information like verbally during meetings and take questions that way. But we're generally open to presenting the information whatever way is most accessible to indigenous nations or the public that we're trying to engage. So we're definitely always open to like trying to refine our approach and find different approaches that work for the audiences.
And thanks. I mentioned in my presentation that the Open Science and Data Platform kind of caters to many different levels of tech savviness in terms of its user base. So very technically savvy users can go and find the database, download the data directly, and then, use it in their own applications. And on the other end of the spectrum, we work very, very closely with different community groups. It could be public interest groups, it could be Indigenous communities. We do workshops where we go in great detail into how to use the platform to answer the questions that people have. There's a video tutorial, a how-to tutorial on the platform, on the site. It's geared to be very user-friendly, but we're always looking for more user feedback. So when you do give it a try, please let me know how you like it and what you think could be improved.
And then for us, in terms of the PAIRS platform, from an infrastructure perspective, it's pretty easy. We're already completely virtual, so I don't anticipate any changes in requirements, or any changes in interactions. And I think that's because we work in the professional industry. But when you flip over to our development planners, they're the ones that are issuing the permits for the backyard decks, and they're dealing with the general public. And I think that's where you get into the times when there are people that are absolutely not technical savvy or don't have any access. So what TRCA does have, it presumes that we have direct access to our planners. We provide names, we provide phone numbers, we provide opportunities to phone directly and ask your questions. And we have a walk-in desk that is available during office hours to people to come in and, again, ask in person and have that direct communication, have meetings in person. So we're absolutely not 100% technical in our plan review services, but we're moving that direction, but not requiring it, for sure.
I see a couple of people at the microphones. Why don't we start on this side?
Hi, I'm Cami from Ontario Power Generation Nuclear. I've got a question for the CNSC folks. I know the focus of the presentation today on environmental protection reviews are mostly on the snapshot, sort of retrospective look. When we do have new projects, you mentioned that don't trigger a federal impact assessment. This is also the process that is used there where instead of a retrospective look, it is a prospective or predictive type of EPR. I'm just wondering for the audience here, sort of EA practitioners who are familiar with the EA process and the impact assessment process as well, we also get this question often from folks either internal to our company as well as members of the public. If asked, what is the difference between an impact assessment and the EPR process, what would sort of be your short answer to that?
Thank you for that question. A little bit of a different question. I'm not going to sit here and say that there are no gaps or differences between the federal impact assessment process and the CNSC's EPR process, because there are. The CNSC's EPR process is a facet of the licensing technical review, and it really focuses more on environmental protection and human health. So for existing facilities, we won't typically look at socioeconomic impacts. We won't typically look at positive impacts either. That being said, there are currently 2 proposed projects in Canada, one in New Brunswick and one in northern Saskatchewan, that did not trigger an integrated assessment under the Impact Assessment Act. So those 2 projects are going to be assessed under an environmental protection review by the CNSC. Again, a predictive outlook for that. And right now we are working through the process. We're currently in discussions with First Nations in New Brunswick to discuss what they would like the process to look like. We've explained what our EPR reports typically look like for existing facilities, and we've just asked them, okay, we pull up a blank document and ask what they would like to see in an EPR report for a proposed facility. So again, I think it's that forward look that's the big difference between a snapshot in time and looking back over the last cycle, as opposed to a predictive assessment that's looking at the possibility of risk and of potential environmental interactions. So maybe I'll just leave it there, but happy to continue the discussion afterward as well.
Yeah, I was just wondering, and apologies if this was touched on, but I didn't think I heard anything. how you're handling consent and authorization for data and information sharing, particularly around traditional knowledge, since a lot of times, well, there's like multi-considerations, but a lot of times traditional knowledge is shared specific to one project. So the fact that these platforms are supposed to be open access or sharing information more broadly than, in my head, I would consider it was initially shared by, or if you're looking for seeking out traditional knowledge to be shared more broadly, I was just curious, like, how you're approaching the whole consent, safety, and yeah, just overall authorization, particularly around cultural intellectual property.
Yeah, so definitely we wouldn't use any traditional knowledge in our EPR reports or in any other CNSC products unless it was clearly shared with the purpose of being used in that report. If we know that traditional knowledge exists around a facility and we think it could be applicable to another report we're working on, we would approach the nation and check in if that was something that they would want to apply to the different project. We do have a traditional knowledge policy that talks about how the CNSC works with and manages any traditional knowledge that has been shared with us. So yeah, it's definitely something that we don't take it lightly. We do take it seriously when traditional knowledge is shared with us, and then we consider where it's appropriate to use it.
And if I could also speak to that, on the Open Science and Data platform, we're surfacing data that's held and it's produced by others. So we're not actually producing data ourselves. So we would rely on those others to have a data sharing agreement in place, or not meant to not be, misusing traditional knowledge without the consent of the Indigenous community. I would like to add, though, that we'd be very, very open to Indigenous communities that would like to share information specifically with the general public, or even specifically with other Indigenous communities. Because the platform could be a wonderful way to do that. And so we have spoken with Moose Cree at a point in the recent past about exploring that. We've been working with a whole bunch of Indigenous communities in the context of the Trans Mountain Pipeline Terrestrial Cumulative Effects Initiative. I think there's like 46 Indigenous communities that are part of that, looking at what Indigenous communities are looking for, each one of course looking for something different in terms of data sharing, and looking to support that through the Open Science and Data platform in the way that that community wants to share what data that community wants to share, and in the way that it can be shared in a good way from their perspective. So if you're interested, I'd love to speak more.
And I think on a project-by-project basis, those discussions can be had just to make sure that there's comfort with sharing information that could be beneficial to the study, and just making really clear expectations with not showing any of that to a public forum, whether it's an online web mapping system, like on many projects, there's that ability to sort of have some information kept for the project, needs, and not sort of shared publicly if that is a concern.
I'm just going to flag, even if you are like referencing other platforms that are hosting data and they have data sharing, sometimes it's strictly for that platform. So just due diligence, it'd be good to check in that you're actually not violating consent by even referring to other platforms. You got you.
Any final words from the panel? Not seeing any last questions, and I think we're close to wrapping up. So thanks, everyone. That was great. Really good discussion.
Just going to invite Beth to stay up here for the closing remarks.
Probably just close it.
You don't want to do the last couple
have a
slides?
Yeah,
And then there's like,
Good. Okay. Thank you to those who've stayed to the end. That's really wonderful, and it's appreciated. For the past few years, I have made the closing remarks at the OAIA Conference. I'm not usually at a loss for words, and I am always looking forward to what is next. But I have found trying to summarize our conference a challenge. I think that me being at a loss for words resonates with the first part of our conference. It's a lot. Emotionally and intellectually, we have learned so much, and for me, growing. The second part of our conference, we can get things done, streamlining, engagement, and then mandates to develop and build. I think that resonates with us all. I hope that we have all learned that through relationship building, good practices, and common goals, we can achieve. I've been a member of OAIA and on its board of directors for many years. What I have seen is a growth in expertise, inclusion, and community. Years ago, the board made a concerted effort to actively engage Indigenous communities, and what you see here today is what we have evolved. We've evolved and you've witnessed this evolution. We have here the nations and the settlers together, respectful and listening, wanting to learn and wanting to understand. Yesterday, I was gifted a beautiful ribbon skirt. Many have approached me today and asked about it, so I decided to share its origin. Lindsay, who you've met today, of the Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation, made it for me and gifted it. The honor that I feel is beyond measure. Represents both my personal commitment and OAIA's commitment to healing and reconciliation. We have learned from our presenters and of the many innovations, policy, and great projects. But I'm finding it a challenge to summarize. So instead, I am going to say a few words that I hope will resonate with you and that you will leave, and that I will leave you with to reflect on. Sector collaboration, knowledge, trust, AI, UAVs, eDNA, mural, invite and engage, uncertainty, modernizing, echo, capacity, meaningful, local community, relationship, law, constitution, spirit, ancestors, the eagle, language, art, inherent rights, beyond the land, health means the good life. As I put all of this together in my mind, I have one final thought. I believe we are entering into a phase of new beginnings. Miigwech. I'm going to now invite Jagategamich to close the OAIA 24 conference. And as he comes to the stage, or the podium, I do want to say thank you to everybody for coming, to ask you to leave your name tags at the door. Sylvia and Greg are there to collect them, and to wish you a safe trip home. Thank you.
Anin, bonjour, Sego, good day. My name is Chimatigamish. and I come from all around this area. I've made my living as far as the west side of Toronto over to Kingston and Ottawa and many points in between. And I say this to you so that you know where I'm coming from, a little bit more about how I think. And I think the last 2 days have been spent in a good and honorable way. I think we have achieved many things beyond what we set out to achieve. Enlightenment in many areas. Kindness to one another. Respect to one another. As we got up to ask the questions and listen to the answers, we were all very respectful. And if you carry this with you, when you leave here, you are going to make strides, giant strides, in being able to network with people. And part of this convention was to network. But I didn't win bingo. Anishnan wajam nadu to metegamishnin Oman dunjaba musindodam nishnaba and wajam nadu migwach ga kabajayik migwach minwaga widokushen and migwach minwa for every person in this room and every conversation that occurred contributes to the success of these 2 days. I hope and I pray that minds have been opened and questions are in those minds that you were afraid or too shy to ask. And I pray for the bravery for you to be able to ask those questions in the future at one time or another. The knowledge that is in this room is here for this time, in this space. But the effects of the knowledge as you store the oral data that you've been given will strengthen you in your work. It'll strengthen you in your home. And it'll strengthen you in your person. These are things that we might not consider are going to accomplish at a convention. But they are some of the important things that might get through the cracks if we don't draw attention to them. I like to end things where everybody gives everybody a hug. But it doesn't look like we'll be able to do that today. So hug yourself right now. Hug yourself and feel warm inside for what you've done the last 2 days. And in my language, I will say, Miigwech ka kabajayeg. Thank you all for coming here the way you have. Miigwech, 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 miigwech.